Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Preserving History and Democracy podcast. My name is Caroline Zamora, and I'm the Chief Deputy County Clerk. We're so excited that you're joining us here today. We have a really exciting episode today, and I'm going to go ahead and introduce Bern Caporal, who is our producer and researcher extraordinaire, and she's going to introduce our guest.
Hi, Caroline. Hello, Angelica.
Hello.
Hello, Jacob and Cynthia. And I'd like to welcome our special guest today. Today, we're going to be talking about the history of St. Genevieve's Church in the downtown area. And please welcome Rosemary Leyva.
Thank you. My name is, as Bern said, Rosemary Leyva. I am a native Las Crucean, and I attended Las Cruces High School, graduated from there. Okay. I went to an NMSU, where I got my Bachelor's of Science, and then I went for my Master's degree in education, bilingual.
Love.
So I also taught for the Gadsden School District for 28 years.
Wow, God bless you.
Taught everything from K to actually 8th grade.
Wow.
But my favorite was 5th.
Really? 5th grade?
Fifth grade.
Interesting. Okay.
I had a blast with those kids.
They're just the right age, right? Old enough, and then
old enough to be able to work on their own, and young enough to enjoy jokes and doing fun stuff.
Because we know you're a jokester.
Oh,
this
really?
we know. This we know.
So you went to Cruces High?
I went to Cruces High.
Okay, and you said you're a Las Crucean girl, born
Yes.
and raised here. Now, the Leyva family, I know a few Leyvas, but I know there's a lot of Leyvas in town. So,
When we were here, we were the first Leyvas.
oh wow, okay,
And our immediate family was here, and the other Leyvas were in Hatch.
okay, got it.
So
I
now we
know,
have a lot of Leyvas here.
I went to school with Derek Leyva.
That's my nephew.
Okay, yeah, I went to school. We were in band together. So see, everyone knows. This is Las
Such a
Cruces.
small world.
I know.
Yeah.
This is Las Cruces.
I love it.
Today, also, before we get into more of your story, because we're going to talk about a lot of stuff, Angelica is joining us today. Angelica is our supervisor for recording and filing. How's it going, Angelica?
very good. Thank you for letting me crash the party. When I heard the topic, I was like, can I join?
I know. I knew as soon as I walked in, and Cynthia was like, oh, I'm going to see if Angelica will join us. I was like, oh, she'll love this. Yes. Love. So, would you like to tell us a little bit more about who you are and what you do in your spare time and kind of what brings you here with us today?
Spare time. I haven't had any
No?
lately.
Good.
Okay, I'm a member of St. Genevieve's Church. I'm also the president for the St. Genevieve Historical Society. I'm also in the process right now of mapping the old San Jose Cemetery.
Oh, wow.
And that goes back to 1859.
That is so
Where
cool.
is the San Jose
That is
Cemetery?
on, it's between Griggs Street and Las Cruces Street, right next to St. Genevieve's
Right next
Church.
to St.
Oh, okay.
That was the very first cemetery in the city.
Well, I'm curious as to why you got so interested in the history of St. Genevieve.
Actually, it wasn't St. Genevieve at first that got my interest. I started doing my family genealogy. And I found out that my great-grandfather was here when they started building the church. And he got involved in doing that. So then I started, as researching, I started doing that. Then I ran into Father Ricardo Bausa at the St. Genevieve's Church. And now Father Chris Williams, but he was seminarian at the time. And we started talking about, we got to do something special for the 150th. And I was telling him, I've been interviewing family members about the family history. And Father Chris turns around to me and says, you're doing the interviews of all the parishioners.
Oh, wow.
You're hired.
I'm hired.
You're hired.
And I said, how much pay? I thank you.
At least he was honest.
But I spent hours and hours with different people. And I heard so many stories about the building of the church, about things that happened in the church, activities.
And this is the church that we know
This is
now.
the church that you know now. And stuff. And a lot of them, it was the only Catholic church in town. So it went from there, just their family history with the church, their marriages, everything. And it was so interesting to hear them talk about it. Because it was the center of town. So everything happened there. From the beginning to where it was this tiny little one-room building
Tell us about that one-room building.
That one-room building was built where on the corner of Las Cruces and Main Street now. Okay, it was supposed to be they were hoping the county courthouse and the jail at the time, but we didn't get it. It went to Mesilla, so it sat there empty, and the women started telling the men, "Hey, you have this you have bars, you have this, you have that. We want a church." Well, we don't have any place. You have that empty building. So guess what? That became the first church. And that it was a little adobe building, and it served for a while till it got too small. Actually, 25 years.
Wow.
And during that time, we had 2 other parishioners donate their quadrants, their piece of land that had been given that was given to the church. It was given to Father Chavez. Okay, this was Mr. Barrio that donated one, and Mr. Conniff.
I know the name Conniff.
So when the town was first set out, they built it, quote, American style. They wanted to have the roads, straight roads, and everything else. But the mayor from Doñana, Pablo Melendres, hired Delos Sackett to do it. Well, he's measuring the town, and he's using a leather rope to measure the squares.
Wow.
Well, when leather's wet, it stretches. And as it dries, it shrinks. So the streets weren't exactly straight by the time they finished.
So that's the reason.
Now I get it.
There you go.
Okay.
That's downtown.
Yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I love, it's Women's History Month. So I love that the women were like, hey, all you guys, you get your bars and, your saloons and things like that. We want a church here. And they were
They
like,
got their church.
and they got
advocated
their
for the
church, and
church.
they advocated and they got their church.
When the church was torn down, they were negotiating on the price, okay? And the person representing St. Genevieve's was also the person trying to buy it. And there came some problems in that. Whereas the community turned around and said, you buy it because you're going to build your bank, or we're pulling our money out.
Wow.
He backed off.
Wow.
That's power.
Interesting.
Power to the people.
Yes. Love it.
And stuff. And it says, that's not fair. It's not right. You're negotiating on the behalf of the church, but you're the one wanting to buy it.
Little conflict of interest.
Conflict of interest,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So the original location of St. Genevieve's was downtown,
It was downtown.
where
It
the
took-
plaza
it-
is.
Mhm. It took the entire block. It was between Campo Street, and Campo was known as Camino al Campo Santo, the road to the cemetery, where the post office is now. Across the street is a Calvario.
Calvary. Uh-huh.
Yeah, the Calvario
church,
church. For a while, before we bought our cemetery, that was used as a burial
Oh,
grounds.
okay.
Okay, so that's why the street was called Camino al Campo Santo, and everybody shortened it to Campo Street.
So if I'm thinking of this now correctly, the current bank that's there is another bank tower. Is it?
Smaller.
Yeah, it's
much
a-
smaller,
Yes.
yes. It's
But
like
it's-
across the street from.
From the Rio Grande Theater,
Yeah.
and
It's the tower that looks right down on the plaza. Is right where that would have been.
Right.
Okay. How
and
wonderful.
originally that would have been one of the once St. Genevieve's Church was built, that's where the school was,
Oh, okay.
the school grounds.
So we're jumping ahead a little
Right.
bit, but I want to go back to that adobe.
The Adobe built church. Okay.
I know you have a picture of it, and Jacob will put that in
for everyone to
for
see.
everyone to see.
Yeah.
Yes. How did we go from the adobe to the
one?
beautiful Saint Genevieve we know?
Okay, in 1871, we had a new priest come in as Father Pierre Lesagne, and I got his picture in there too. Okay, he came in, and at the same time, the Laredo Academy had been built. And the Mother Superior, Mother Paraxis, talked to the father and said, we need a new church. The church is not big enough anymore. We have too many people. We can't fit everybody in there for Mass. So since Father Pierre was French, and he had just come from Tularosa, where they had built a church, and being French, they're going to use what the knowledge that they have we ended up with a Gothic-looking church.
Wow, that is so interesting. I love that's the story, is because he was a French.
And what's really
French
interesting
priest.
is in that first tower, the one closest to the gate over here, that one, they built around the church. The church was actually inside that
The
tower.
little adobe
The
church.
little adobe?
This is the little adobe church.
Oh.
Wow.
So this one right here was the 1st right here.
Right.
This one right here.
So when they finished building it, the men said, we're done. And the women said, no, you're done. Now you got to take the adobe church out. And to make them work, the women actually showed up with their rebosos, which are their shawls, and would put the adobe in them and carry it out.
Women had a lot of power back in the day, huh?
Yep. Even though they couldn't vote.
Right.
They couldn't vote, but man, did they get stuff done.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was done. So we had, was made, by that time, the railroad had come into Las Cruces. So that's where they got the red brick.
Beautiful.
I love that. That's how they got the red.
We did a podcast back in season 1, I think, on the railroad and how it would brought exchange of ideas and cultures and everything. And here it is.
Here's another example of that.
Yes.
Mhm. Yes.
Brought the brick, the red brick.
Love it.
And it was funny because when Mother Lasagne was raising funds, the railroad was here, so they were having to do something for the men to stay around and not go straight to the bars. They started having different fundraisers. They actually were selling oysters.
Wow.
And then they had the enchilada suppers, because that's how they raised the funds to build the church. They needed to raise $300,000 to build it.
Which back then I'm sure was equivalent to
Fortune.
millions now, millions and millions.
And they raised it by fundraisers, having fiestas. That was the beginning of the fiestas, and raffles and stuff. And they raised the funds to do it.
And they still do the annual fiesta.
Right, annual fiesta and enchilada
St.
suppers,
Genevieve's.
and
Yes.
fish fries, and we
Yep.
just had one at the church.
So who was Saint Genevieve? I don't know anything about that.
Saint Genevieve was a saint. She was born in France in 441. Okay, she at the age of 8, the bishop saw her and told her, "One day God is going to grant you your first wish." And she wanted to serve the people. During her time as she was growing up, yes, she was herding the sheep and the goats and stuff. But as she got older, a famine hit Paris, France. So she went to big business people and got them to donate food, which she would feed to the poor. So you'll see pictures of Saint Genevieve, and she's got an apron. Again, I've got pictures of that. She's got an apron where she's got bread, because that's how she would carry the bread to the people. Okay? During that time, Attila the Hun was destroying Europe, and he was headed right for Paris. The people were panicking, and she says, "No, let's pray." And they started praying, and they would have, they would go around town, around the church, and praying, and Attila the Hun turned paths and left Paris alone.
Do you know how old she was at this time?
She, the first time that any of her miracles happened, she was, at that one, she was, when Attila the Hun, she was 19.
Wow.
And so she's did miracles. The time there was a plague of some sort in Paris, and people were dying. And she said that she had passed. They took her body, and they went around like in a procession around the church, and those that managed to touch it were healed. Out of that, only 19 people died.
Wow.
So she saved Paris.
Amazing miracles, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I like that they kept the name.
They kept the name. Well, part of it, the reason they kept the name was too, when they started building, and her saint day is January 3rd. Guess what they finished building? January 3rd.
Is
Wow.
that why? Well, no, because St. Genevieve's, it had the original church. So how did it become St. Genevieve's?
Because they were building the mother ditch to carry the water from
That's right.
Doniana.
We've talked about this on another podcast. And when the day that they start the ditch is the
Mother's
Saint's Day.
January
And that will
3rd.
be what the church is called.
So they called it that. So it went from there And then with the building of the church and everything else, they decided they were going to name it St. Genevieve. Because she was also a protector for them from the Indians.
I'm so fascinated because I had no idea, just growing up here, that there was so much of a French connection to all of this.
A lot of our priests that did come here were French. Okay? Because it goes back to the bishop, Leyva, who came in from France. And that's where they were bringing most of the bishops.
Okay. I had no idea. That is so cool.
Part of my main interest is because I'm a parishioner of St. Genevieve's. And so I know we have the St. Genevieve statue in the front
Yes.
of the church.
Mm-hmm.
Where did the statue come from?
France.
From France.
Oh.
It came from France. We, at the time, we had Father had gone back to France. And he's a whole story by himself.
Wow.
Okay? He went and he had it ordered and it was sent over here. And I'm thinking that's Father Roger that did it.
Do you know what year?
Oh, no, it wasn't Roger. It was Eschlevier that did it. Okay. She came in. He was here in the late 1800s when the church started. And church started in 1859. So he would have been here about 1860s when he went and he ordered. And that was one of the first statues in the church.
So we've had that statue since the 1800s,
Mm-hmm.
mid 1800s.
Wow.
That's amazing.
That is amazing.
Mm-hmm.
So why did St. Genevieve, the church, move from the downtown area? Why was that decision made?
That was made by the leaders of the town and the bishop. They felt that the church really had no place among business. They were trying to revive the city, and they convinced the church was in bad condition. So they decided that the church needed to move because it didn't belong downtown. And that set off a whole big set of problems for everybody because the parishioners did not agree. We knew that the church was in bad shape, needed a lot of work. It had been condemned already 3 times after it was been built. Because originally when it was built, it had 44-foot towers. Okay. One of the things that a gentleman told me his great-grandfather had worked with building the church, and they didn't use a good foundation. Said they had stacked the rocks doing on it, and it wobbled. They didn't cement it right, I guess, whatever. And the weight from the towers also threw it off. So at one point they actually removed the towers. And they removed the towers in the 30s, okay, and left it sawtooth. You had one kind of higher tower than the other one. And it didn't look great, but it worked. Then they did later on, and with Father Buchanan, he removed the towers and set it to what everybody remembers, the Mexican tile look on the roof and the tower that everybody remembered. And that's when they plastered the red brick into white.
I was going to ask because it's not red anymore.
Yeah, I was gonna say it. Like I don't remember it ever being.
You don't remember it? No, none of us do because that was
Okay.
before our time.
Got it. So, is there a significance about those towers having to be 44 feet high?
No, they just wanted it
It's just what
because
they
the Gothic style that they used to build the church, that was part of it.
Oh.
You know, if you look at the churches in Europe, that's the towers. They have the big high towers. The priests that came to build it, that's what they were used to, so that's what they built. And everywhere that the priests were, that we had the French priest, that's the same tower that you see, the type of tower that you see.
Yeah, it's very Notre Dame looking.
Right, that's
like,
what.
Not exactly, but
Mhm.
you know, it has that
It
same
does.
look and
Yes.
feel. Mm-hmm.
And then the bells were in the tower, and the bells is a whole different story.
Oh, tell me.
Okay, the bells were built with Father Chavez, who was our first priest. Okay, we didn't have any bells, we didn't have anything. It was just like I showed you the little picture of the old church. So they decided they were going to connect. They were going to build a tower. Build the bells. So they started collecting metal from around town, everything. And the day they did it, and it's not Chavez anymore because he had been transferred, it's Father Roger. Okay? They started collecting. And then they thought, okay, we have enough. We're going to melt it down and make in a crucible and see if we can make bells. Well, they're doing it on a Saturday when people come into town, or the town as much as there was, and everybody sees them, they're over there burning something, so they go look to see what's going on. Well, they're melting. This is, oh, look, this Sackett's men were in town. And they see it, so there's a gentleman there, and he pulls out a $20 gold piece and flips it into the crucible. And people look at him and says, wait a minute, this is, and it's not a derogatory term at the time, but this was a gringo doing it. Okay, and gringo came from the song, How Green Grows My Valley. The people would hear him singing it. They didn't know the words, but they kept hearing these white sailors coming in saying, gringos. So that's where the terminology.
I never knew that.
Me either.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until later
So
that
it wasn't a derogatory.
It was derogatory. Okay?
Okay.
But they said, wait a minute, we're not going to let them beat us. They started taking off jewelry,
Wow.
the metal buttons, and tossing it into the crucible. So we ended up with 2 bells. They had horrible
That is
sound.
amazing.
But guess what? The bells were used for communication. In case of a fire, the bells were rung. Somebody died, the bells were rung. Time to come to Mass, the bells were rung. An Indian attack or anything, bells were rung. So he served more than just calling the people to church.
Now, are these bells still there?
The bells are still there.
Wow.
Father Lasene had them recast it because they cracked. Okay, and they sit on the towers at the church, and they're rung before each Mass.
And do you happen to know what the tones of the bells are? Like the notes?
No.
No? Okay. That'd be interesting to know.
But we ring them, and we've had people complain. Oh, we can't sleep late. Well, 11 o'clock is too late.
It's 11 o'clock.
Time to get up.
Pretty sure the noise ordinance does not take effect at 11 in the morning.
I just want to bring up that today is the first Monday of daylight savings time.
Uh-huh.
It was tough this morning.
It was tough this morning.
There's no excuse for 11 o'clock, no matter what.
Yeah. Well, it was the same story on Sunday. I go to the 8 o'clock Mass, and there wasn't very many people there.
Was there anything else besides the St. Genevieve statue that came from the original church to the new church?
Oh, yes. We have the statues. We have Our Lady of Guadalupe that was bought by our 3rd or 4th priest that we had there. And she's there. We have Our Lady of Lourdes statue. She was bought by Father, I think it was again Father Lasine. We have St. Joseph. We also have the altar. We got it back after the church was torn down. The altar was given to the university for their museum. They had it for a while, then they decided we're not gonna use this display, and it was served in a Quantat somewhere on campus, and it got wet. They were gonna get rid of it, and somebody thought about John Paul Taylor, and called him and said, hey, we have the St. Genevieve altar. Do you want it? He said, yes, I'll take it. And they contacted the church, and this priest, no, we don't have room, blah, blah, blah. It went on like that for years. He kept it for, I think, 12 years. And then he talked to our priest, and he said, yeah, we want it. We'll take it. Of course, it was in pieces. It was in pieces. It was rain damaged and everything. For our 150th anniversary, we thought we want to do something. And under the direction of Father Ricardo Bausa, and at the time seminarian Chris Williams, we got it together, and we said, we're going to redo this. We were offered this little workroom to work in, this shed. And I get a kick out of this because it's a metal building. There's a hole right in the middle of the roof. Okay, and 84 people showed up to work on it.
Wow.
From the ages of 4 to 84. Okay, we worked on it. Father Chris was the only one with woodworking experience, and he got a couple other men to help him. But everybody was there helping. From scraping the wood, we got the wood from Ohio, and everybody was involved. And it took us, we laughed because Father Ricardo told us we started, I think it was about April or so. We started working. He says, okay, guys, get it done. I'm off to Notre Dame because I'm going to go work on my master's degree.
Oh.
And we did. We worked on it, and it got done within about, I think it was 4 to 5 months. And we laughed because nobody ever got hurt. Nobody ever got anything. We had rain those months, okay? And here, this big old hole in the roof, and we're thinking, oh my God, we've got all this wood, it's going to get wet. It rained, but not a drop came in.
Protected.
It was protected. The day because it took us like 4 trips to take the altar back to the church and set it up. Okay? We'd put it on a trailer, and it'd be towed out to the church. And you could hear the thunder, you could hear the lightning, and you're thinking, okay, it's going to pour. It did not rain until we actually set the altar, the altar on the altar where it goes. And then it poured like crazy. Each time we brought a piece in, that would happen.
Wow.
And the day that we opened it up and let everybody see what we had done, because we restored everything, the candlesticks, the tabernacle, everything that was on it, on the church before, is now on the church again.
Wow.
On the altar. And it was packed. We had people standing outside. It's a good thing the fire marshal didn't say anything, because we had them everywhere, leaning against the wall, sitting down, even outside. That everybody was so happy that it returned.
Wow.
How beautiful. I love that.
When I was researching for this podcast, I came across a video of a woman who you probably would know, but I didn't get her name in the video. And she said that her brothers had gone off to World War II, and that one day the bells started ringing, and her mother sent her down to the church to find out why the bells were ringing. And she came back with the news that World War II was over. So you were talking about communication through the bells. Here was a really big example of communication. What is your earliest memory of St. Genevieve?
My earliest memory of church is, I remember going into the church and everybody was always dressed up in their Sunday best. All the women wearing hats, so you would see all these different hats. Even the children. I remember wearing my hat going to church.
Fancy.
And you would wear, some of the ladies were wearing gloves. Their heels. Everybody was dressed up. Even the children. And I always remember the smell. You smell the candles and the incense. And to me, that always brought back the sense of being in a church. And stuff. And then the people walking, especially the women, because it's wooden floors. And there's a basement underneath. So you hear the click, click, click. Uh-huh. And I remember at one time, you're hearing the click, 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 and somebody's heel got caught. So then you heard the click, thump, because it broke her heel off.
Yeah.
But you always had, and that for me, that was always what I remember of the church. Yeah. And, the priest and everything. I couldn't tell you which priest it was that was doing it, but I always remember that. And the stained glass windows, which we do have in the church now.
I've noticed that on the stained glass windows, there's names of prominent families that you'll recognize that lived in Las Cruces.
Now, is that because they made a donation?
Some of them made a donation to buy it. There's 2 windows that are in the name of Padre Miguel, okay, and Padre Pedro. The Saint Michael Archangel is one. It's for Padre Miguel, and Padre Miguel was one of the priests, okay. And so those two, but the other ones were family members, like the Luceros, the Roalds. There was one story that I found out about the glass that to me I thought was interesting because I never thought about it. There's a one for a young lady, Nieves. And I said, who was his family? And apparently this young lady was being courted by somebody she didn't want to marry. And when she refused to marry him, he killed her.
Oy.
And so as a remembrance, a memory, her parents paid for a window in her name. And we still have all the windows. And if you look in the pictures, the windows have a high point to them. I have some of them. I don't have all of them returned. But I have the windows, because the stained glass windows were the picture, and then on the bottom was another part that would open because there was no air conditioning at the time. And they only put the stained glass window part back in. Yes. So in my historical storage room, I have the other windows.
Do you?
Yes.
That
When
is
we
so
when we had our 150th Mass, we had a lot of items come back. We had statues come back that I guess had been given to the people when they tore down the church. But we have a lot of the items. We have one priest that we had there, Father Vandermason, bought vestments for the priest, gold lame material. Okay, we allowed the priest wore them for their 150th anniversary when we had the parade.
Oh, wow. So they got to wear those.
They got to wear them.
Yeah.
And they laughed at me because I said, okay, you get to wear them, but right after the parade, you meet me back here and you give them back to me. And stuff, and we still have them. But they've got quite a bit of value to them. Not so much money-wise, but historical, because they were bought in the 1925, 1930s. And those vestments, anytime a church like Hatch, Rhodey, which is Colorado, what used to be Colorado, had some big ceremony or whatever, they borrowed them. And then they'd come back. Somebody else had them, they'd borrow them, and they'd come back. And, we had, St. Genevieve became like the mother church for the area because we were the first and oldest church. Our priest would have to travel from Las Cruces to Colorado, which is Rhodey and Hatch, up to Tularosa, back. They traveled 75 miles by horseback.
Is St. Genevieve's older than the Basilica?
Oh, yes.
In Nicaea? Really?
Well, time-wise, yes. The actual building, no.
Right.
Okay? But we
Yes.
were the ones that started the cathedral, Immaculate Heart of Mary.
And what about Messia you asked about? Messia.
Oh, Messia?
Uh-huh.
Messia is 5 years older than St. Genevieve.
Oh, okay.
Just 5 years.
I know. Wow.
Yeah, just 5 years.
How interesting. And so I want to go ahead and touch a little bit more on schools, because in some of our previous podcasts, we've also talked about specifically when we talked about the Greater Chamber in Loretto, and we talked about the school, and it was run by the nuns. But churches and schools were very much connected. And so we did talk, you touched a little bit that's where the school was, downtown. Can you tell us a little bit more about the school?
Okay, the school would have been on the Las Cruces side. They had grades kinder to 8th grade. Okay, and here's something funny I always thought. When they first started the schools, we didn't have indoor plumbing.
Wow.
So one of the first classes they had to have was bathroom etiquette 101.
Interesting. They had to teach the kiddos how to use the bathroom.
Right,
Yeah.
because they didn't have it.
Yeah.
And we were, at that point, we were starting to get plumbing put in. And did you know that the German prisoners that were held here were the ones that put in the plumbing?
Really?
They're the
Yeah,
ones
so
that dug the ditches and everything to put in the pipes and the plumbing
when would that have been?
during World War II.
Okay.
They were probably put at the end of World War One, because we started having plumbing
Yeah.
more by then.
By then. Interesting.
Did you go to that school?
No,
No.
no. By the time I started, I went to Bradley Elementary, which at one time was Las Cruces High School and stuff. And there was, at first it was called Grandview. It was one of the earliest schools. The earliest school here in Las Cruces was Southward. And that's where between Amador and Loman on Alameda Street. If you recall, it'd be across from the new bus station now.
Okay. Okay.
That's where it was there.
Interesting.
And
Where the
stuff.
hospital is?
Across the street, catty corner from it,
Catty corner from the hospital.
from the old hospital. And St. Genevieve's was involved in bringing in the Memorial General Hospital at the time. Because we had our first hospital was an 8-room hospital, an 8-bed hospital by Dr. McBride. He was very active at St. Genevieve's. Everything went back to the church. It's
I
tied in.
see that. It's like the hub.
Well, back in during the time, the early years, 1910 and stuff. Okay, we already had the mafia here, and there was bars open all the time. And one of our priests came in, and he told the congregation, he said, "This is wrong." He says, "Look at this. It's only the women and children, and the men are lying outside on the grounds drunk. We have more more bars and stuff than we do, people." So he actually talked. We had a police force, okay? We had the constable. We had the city police. There was 3 different groups of police. So he talked to them and said, "Look, there's a law that says bars must be closed at midnight. You need to enforce it." And when the priests at that time talked, they listened. They actually did. They started closing the bars at 12. And the men started showing up to church. So
How
it was
interesting.
Yeah, it was, so they were, the church was involved.
Yeah.
At that time, there was no big, church and government separated.
Well, I think it's so interesting. We've talked about this maybe on some other episodes. And then I think when we did our ghost tour, Bert, I know we talked about it up in Santa Fe. But and I think this also comes back to the Spanish colonials and kind of the Spanish tradition coming up from the Camino Real, is that the town really centered around the church. And the church was like we see here, was responsible for the school. It was responsible for a hospital. And so we've kind of seen that throughout history a lot, I think.
Mm-hmm. It did. It worked. There was a school on church grounds, and there were even a small type cafeteria set up to feed the kids on there.
You mentioned being one of the original families that settled.
Mm-hmm.
So are you from the downtown area?
I live in the historic district.
Yeah.
Okay.
My street at the time was called Convent Street because it's Kansas now, but we ended up right where the Citizens Bank is now, where the Laredo Academy was. As a matter of fact, my grandfather used to farm the area and give food to the convent.
And you still live there?
I still live there. I still own the property. I had to rebuild the house because it was adobe, and with the floods and all the rains and everything, it started getting a lot of damage. But my dad and I rebuilt my house, and I can honestly say I shoveled all the dirt for the foundation
Wow.
and stuff, and my brothers helped.
Yeah. So my family, my mom's family grew up in that area. My mom grew up off of East Picacho
Mm-hmm.
and Mesquite, right there on that little block. I know there's still a lot of original families there still today.
There, we just had about a month ago where we did a reclaim your plot. for the city, because the city is 175 years old. Okay, and we had original family members show up to claim their plot, and it was really interesting because they drew the plot on the. We did it at Klein Park. Now Klein Park is where they do the drawing for the city plots for the families.
That is where they did the
Yeah.
actual drawing.
Right.
Original to see who got where. Oop,
Yeah.
when they settled Las Cruces.
Interesting.
Wow. I did not know it was at Klein Park.
Yeah, that was Klein Park. It wasn't called
amazing.
Klein Park there until much later after the mayor.
I just wanted to give credit to a Doña Ana Historical Society member, Morris Dexler, and he produced a YouTube all about St. Genevieve. He had the foresight to videotape in 66 and 67 before the teardown and show the church and everything. And maybe, Jacob, we could put the link up on the website. How do people feel about St. Genevieve today, so many decades later?
You know what? A lot of the people that knew the old church have passed and stuff. So a lot of the people, they like what we have now. So you really can't say they're not going to react like they did back when they were first told they were going to tear down the church. Okay? Because when they tore down the church, you had an uprising. You had people chain themselves to the church.
So why was it because it was condemned? Like, why were they?
It was condemned 3 times before they finally ended up having to tear it down. Okay? Again, it goes to back, like I said at the beginning, where they talked about the fact that the foundation was not as sturdy. They had, the walls had cracked. And I think I left the picture at home. I have pictures where you could see where the walls were so cracked and falling. As a matter of fact, during one of the services, once a mass starts, a priest does not leave the altar. Okay? During a mass, a chunk of wall fell, and the lady screamed and passed out. He left the altar, because they really thought it had hit her. It just, the scare made her faint. It missed her, but it did. Wow. And stuff.
And so you said that there was really an uprising in the people.
Oh
were
yeah,
even,
I mean the people just. It even went to the state Supreme Court.
wow.
It did.
Oh, let's find it, Bern.
You have to.
Yeah.
It went to the state Supreme Court. There was calls to the Victor General, which is in Washington, the representative of the Vatican.
Oh, wow.
And stuff. And the people said, okay, you have to tear the church down, build it on the same place. It's been done before. But they refused.
Wow.
The bishop said, no, we needed to do that. So they sold the church for 300,000 pieces, the property for 300,000 pieces of.
How
So,
interesting.
yeah, so by that time we had Holy Cross going. So all the kids that had attended the school from years earlier, they went to Holy Cross School. And they had to pay, so a lot of people didn't go.
So when the church closed, did folks just start going to Holy Cross or to Messiah?
They went to Holy Cross. Years earlier, we had built Our Lady of Health. Okay. We had built Immaculate Heart of Mary. So some went there. At the same time, Father Ryan had procured where our parish hall is now. There was another hall. He had bought that, and it became a temporary chapel. So we had services there. And that was right across from St. Joseph Cemetery.
That's where the hall is now.
I'm sorry?
Where the hall is now?
Where the hall is now.
Okay.
Now it's the classrooms
Uh-huh.
for catechism. That was there.
Okay.
When I met you, it was at the Archives Bazaar. And you had books
Yes.
filled with records. Can you tell us about those?
Oh, the church records. Yes. I was involved with a project called Messiah Valley Project. And what we did was the bishop allowed us to translate the records from Latin to English for baptisms, marriages, and burials. And it allowed us to do it from 1859 to 1900. So there was a group of us from different places. We worked on it for 3 years, and we translated the book. The books are available at the Brannigan Library.
From Latin to English.
From Latin to English.
Wow.
And it's really funny how I got into that, because when I was doing my family genealogy, I went to the church to ask if I could see the records, and she told me no. And I said, I went prepared. I had my paper, my pencil. I even had gloves, because I knew you didn't touch the books. And the secretary at the time looked at me and says, well, we've let people before, and they write in them. I says, I will not write in a book. That's very wrong. And she says, okay. And she says, just wait a minute. She went and got a book. She brought it to me, opened it, and said, read this. I had no idea what book she got. I looked at it. It's Latin. I'm looking at it, and she pointed to one and says, I read the names. I smiled to myself. I hopefully inside, she picked my great-grandparents.
Wow.
Really?
She didn't know. And I didn't.
Interesting.
And she says, read this. So I did. And just by the reading, from what I knew, what would be, a few words that I could recognize, plus the names, I said, this is and Baltasar Madrid, and he's marrying, my grandmother and stuff. And so I read the whole, because I recognized the names. She said, okay, you can do this. But you do it right here in front of me. So I did. I'd go and sit there and write, just doing all that stuff. And ever since, I started, when they told me about that project, and Sally Kading was the one that was working on it, she called me and asked me, hey, would you be interested in doing it? And I said, yeah. So I did, and I can probably say I did all the marriages for St. Genevieve. We had people from California that were doing translating.
Wow.
And the different people, several people from St. Genevieve's tried and said, no, I can't do this. Can't read it. Because the writing sometimes.
Oh, we know.
We have
Yes,
in the vault.
You've read in the vaults, yeah.
Yeah, we have old records and beautiful handwriting, hard to read.
Yes.
And then, even in Spanish, because most of them are in Spanish, but Latin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't even imagine.
But it was fun doing it, because I got a lot of my family history out of it.
Yeah.
But it was just, learning about the people and stuff. And I got to, hey, I know Father so-and-so, because I read it in the book. I've seen, And we had one priest that is buried in San Jose Cemetery, who actually carved, you've seen it, the crucifix that hangs over the altar. Hand carved,
wow.
out of a mesquite root. Oh. And mesquite root is very hard to cut. And he did it, and we still have and he did that way before St. Genevieve's was still a little adobe building. Wow. And then what's really is that gentleman also worked with the church in Doniana, and helped them with the bricks and helped them to build. He spent the last 6 years of his life carving his own coffin.
Wow.
They said it was elaborate. And Father Pierre Lasagne, the priest that I was telling that built this church, the day he died, okay, the bells rang, because they were also used to announce funerals. They played the doble, the toll, the death toll. Okay, the day of his funeral, the entire town shut down during his services.
Such an important
Yeah.
part of the community.
Yeah.
Oh, how sweet.
I understand that you've also written some historical information or a book.
Yes, we wrote a book. It's called The Heart of Las Cruces, The History of St. Genevieve's Church. And it tells you the whole story, and like I've told you, plus a few other stories and other things that have gone on with the church.
Where can we find the book?
We have the book available for you at the church.
Okay.
The
The
church
gift shop?
office. The gift shop. It's $10. Okay? And if I'm there, I'll be glad to sign it.
When are you there?
I know. I was like, we're going to get some for the whole staff.
I'm there on Thursdays and Friday mornings.
Okay.
Okay. Well, maybe we could do a special signing for the staff.
That'd be great.
That would be awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes,
That'd
we're
be
big
fun.
on history because we have so much historical records, property records, and other records. And so we like to get things that educate the staff about history, because we have people coming in to do genealogy, historians writing books. And so it's important for staff to know a little bit to guide people in the right direction. Yeah.
Yes, I used to spend hours at the old courthouse when you were down there doing my genealogy.
Love. Well, Bern, do you have anything else?
I do. I
Okay.
have a couple of things from the vault.
All right.
I have the deed for the 1967 on Espina, St. Genevieve.
Uh-huh.
I have what I believe is the original deed to the church in the downtown area, which I'd be happy to make a copy for you.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I believe it is. It just happened that I was in the vault researching this, and there was a gentleman in there, and he was himself looking for a church. And he said, oh, they're notoriously hard to find because it could say the Catholic Church, it could say the priest names, it could say the bishop's name, it could say the diocese name. It's really hard to find. So I believe this is it. It says Catholic Church in the right year. So I think that would be it. I also have some. Oh, sure.
Just curious.
I got a couple of pictures that you had also. We'll show them on our podcast. And then just for fun, a couple of marriage records that, people got married left and right in that church. It was a big piece of community and the center of all things good.
Well,
Yeah.
this year for speaking of marriages, this year for our fiesta, which will be in October, I'm doing as part of my historical display. I'm doing marriages of Saint Genevieve,
Oh, how fun.
and
I
I've got
love it.
so if any of you were married there, or somebody that was married there, if they'll give me a copy of their wedding picture. I've got it putting it up. I've got some from the
That's so
church, and I have
cool.
where they came in on a horse and buggy.
Oh,
And so whoever and I will copy it and give it back. And I've got displays. I'll be having a display.
Oh, how lovely. I love that. I think my parents were married at the Cathedral at Immaculate Heart. I don't think they were married at St. Jen's.
But I did this all from all the old St. Genevieve parishioners. I've done that one. I did a second book called Legacy of Honor. And that book I did not bring, but we have it at the church. It's all the military guys, all our veterans that have served from the beginning, where they were in the territorial militia, all the way to present wars.
Yeah. I think we need to do a part 2, Bern. Let's do a part 2 of this podcast, and let's talk about weddings, and let's talk about all those who served, and
Sure.
let's talk about some of your other books. I think that would be a lot of fun. Yeah.
Be glad to.
okay.
Yeah. Well, I guess that's it for today. We're very excited. Thank you so much for joining us today. This was a lot of fun. We love history here. I just want to say thank you to Angelica for joining us today.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Thank you to Bern, our producer, researcher extraordinaire.
Yes.
Thank you to Cynthia and Jacob behind camera today for producing and editing our podcast. Thank you to Rosemary for joining us and for bringing all this history. This is so exciting. We're going to get some books for our staff. I want one of these replica paintings for here in the office. And I think it'll live in my office. It's beautiful.
Thank you.
But thank you so much, Rosemary, for joining us today. This is the Preserving History and Democracy podcast. Be sure to follow us on our social media sites. And you can find this podcast wherever you get your podcasts, Spotify, Libsyn, Apple, iHeart Podcasts. And so wherever you get your podcast, be sure to follow us and be sure to share this as well. You can also find a video of this podcast on our YouTube. And we will see you next time.